Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Right, I'll put me. So, I often, when people say, "What are you on about? What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I spent the first 15 years of my career being the person who said, 'That's lovely science, but I'm sorry, it doesn't justify the price that you want to charge for it.'" I was very popular with innovators, as you can imagine. And not being the quickest man on earth, I eventually realized after 15 years that the frequency with which I was making this statement meant that maybe the R&D system in life and health sciences was not well designed for the current state of the world. For those of you who don't know, health technology assessment is the umbrella term for the mechanisms that healthcare systems use to decide whether they should pay for a new technology, and if so, how much, and any other constraints like only a subgroup of the regulatory approved population, etc., etc. And I spent an awful lot of time going, you know what? It doesn't work. And helping organisations like NICE in the UK and CADTH in Canada and PBAC in Australia drill down to find that subgroup of patients for whom it might just about be good or good enough. And the problem with that is it means that the investors don't get the return on the investment they'd expected. And patients who could clinically benefit, lots of them don't get it. So I summarise this challenge up in the tagline of nobody benefits till there's a paid invoice. And so thinking about the rules that determine whether the invoice gets paid as early in your innovation journey as possible seemed like a good thing to do. And so I spent the second 15 years of my career thinking about, okay, given how uncertain we are at early stages of the life cycle, the innovation life cycle, how do we do that? You know, NICE likes a randomized controlled trial, maybe one with several hundred patients in. How on earth does a small SME do this stuff early? The other thing is, these things are hugely expensive. You know, it's about £250,000 to do a late stage health technology assessment. And small companies don't have that sort of money. So again, when the analysis is most valuable, there's a challenge that the people who need it don't actually have the resources. And so in thinking about how we re-engineer the system, we had to think about what's the relatively low resource stuff that we can do. And so I'm going to talk today very briefly and very quickly about this thing called early health technology assessment. So how early is early? Well, around TRL4, we can start asking sensible questions because we've got a sense of the broad clinical indication that we're going for. And we can ask some questions about, is there enough benefit? Is there enough unmet need in those? You know, you may have a portfolio, you might have 2 or 3 possible indications, and you can say, well, is there enough unmet need? Or is the cost that this indication imposes on the health system sufficient for it to be realistic that we can develop our technology with the time and the financial investment that that implies, and then charge a price that gives us our commercial return on investment and still hit the value proposition, what is broadly summarised as the cost effectiveness. So NICE has its £30,000 per quality adjusted life year. In the US, the equivalent has been estimated at $104,000 per quality adjusted life year. And as we progress, we can ask more specific questions because the uncertainty changes. We can look in the clinical evaluation and regulatory approval around the 6 through 8. We can start asking very specific questions about not only is the evidence you are looking to create sufficient for regulatory approval, which is a necessary condition, but is it sufficient for reimbursement approval? And on top of that, is it going to actually be enough to get clinicians to adopt your technology? Is it going to be enough to reassure patients that they should switch from their current technology to your new technology? Because yes, there are early adopter patients out there, but a lot of patients actually like what they know. And they need evidence and persuasion and reassurance that switching is not a dangerous or a risky activity. And then finally, and increasingly importantly, the design of the adoption and diffusion of the technology. So as regulators, in order to enable the innovation economy in life sciences, have lowered the regulatory hurdle and essentially moved earlier up the TRL pathway, regulators have said the condition of that is you collect evidence on market. And actually, it's possible to identify that evidence that you're going to collect or you're going to need to collect, or it may just be more efficient to collect on market. But knowing that if you are collecting evidence on market, you are probably getting a lower price. And so understanding what that does to your revenues and how long it's going to do that for your revenues is an important thing when you're trying to figure out what's the investment and what's the return on investment, and conceptualizing that. So what are the benefits? Well, early HTA, it enables companies to understand regulators, payers, clinicians, and patients, and what it is they value about the product. Importantly, it quantifies the commercial potential, and in doing that, really gets you a very early business case. Now, it's going to look not like the outline business case that you would take to the health system, but given the payer, the health system, is where the return on the investment case is, it's really useful to your investors or your potential investors. So you can, it really can inform that and start putting numbers that aren't, oh, the global market's worth this, but actually are very specific. It can identify the most attractive clinical applications. So you might have a technology that could do treatment, secondary prevention, primary prevention. The scale of the market for primary prevention is probably going to be the biggest, and you're going to be really tempted to go for it. But anyone who's ever run a primary prevention trial knows that they're A, very large, and B, they take a long time. So actually your upfront investment, much bigger. And so thinking in those terms about which is the commercially most attractive rather than maybe the most attractive just from the perspective of patients or changing the clinical outcomes or the health system's burden, it allows you to prioritize on basically commercial value bases which potential application you can go for. It can provide a range of technology value-based pricing. So very early on, you probably have a sense of the effectiveness is going to lie somewhere between X and Y. Understanding what X means for a value-based price versus Y is really quite important. And it helps you understand the relationship between the cost of goods you want to be aiming at, if you think you're closer to Y in your effectiveness than X. So there's that relationship. If you explore it early, it can actually inform what you're doing in your manufacturing, your engineering of your manufacturing process. And then finally, it describes the size of the problem addressed, root causes, and the benefits of solving it. All that sort of flows out of the stuff you're going to have to do to get the previous benefits. So it's an opportunity to design payer requirements as well as regulatory requirements into your R&D program. And because they're related to quantifications of the return on investment, your ability to leverage investors to actually fund that is stronger than you might think. It gives you insight into the potential for reimbursement and value-based pricing opportunities, different markets, different budgets, different tolerances of prices, and this can be really critical input to an investment pitch. It prioritizes your evidence generation, and it makes sure that you focus only on the things that you have to do, regulators make you do, and anything else, you have a clear line of sight on how it improves your probability of commercial success. I know as an academic, I will smuggle my academic research interests into anything I think I can get away with. Do it all the time. And it's fun. It's the rules of the game. But once you're an SME, actually, your investors don't want that. They want a clear line of sight between investment in generating evidence and improving the probability of success at market and therefore revenue. And these techniques, this toolbox allows you to get at that in a very formal and transparent way, so you can de-risk the investment by being explicit about these things. If you've gone through this process, it strengthens your ability. And when I mean your ability, I really mean your negotiating power. When you get to that, we have conditional regulatory approval. We're collecting this evidence on market. What price can we charge? How long are we going to have to live with this discount price because we're collecting evidence? In thinking about what evidence you push to post-market, you can be really quite explicit about a commercial evaluation of that. Not just, oh, that's easy or easier to do post-market, and it's a bit messy to run in our clinical trial program. What does it do to your price? Thinking about it explicitly and making an informed choice. So that prospective design of your on-market evidence generation. And in that, you have a strengthened ability to get that procurement, to get to that paid invoice. And that's what it's all about. Nobody benefits till there's a paid invoice. Design with the end in mind. The end is the paid invoice. So, with colleagues at the University of Leeds originally, and then University of Alberta in Canada, and the Institute of Health Economics in Canada, we've developed a series of evaluation products, really. One we call the Technology Development Investment Case, and it looks at that. What's the headroom for improvement? Is it big enough to justify the scale of investment that you're going to have to make to get to market from where you are now? You know, in the nicest possible way, the world doesn't need a 5th, 6th, or 7th HER2-positive breast cancer therapy. Boy, oh boy, do we still need things in the triple-negative breast cancer space. You know, it's a lot better than it was 2 years ago, but it's still a hugely challenging space. So thinking in that space, what are the value propositions and which are most important to target? And that means thinking about who's going to make the funding decision, who's going to decide to pay, and what do we know about the things they want to pay for? Because it's not just cost effectiveness. They're often interested in equity over unmet need. They're often interested in promoting innovation. You know, so we find ways to pay for new gene therapies, at least for some, because we want to signal that those innovations are really important. Structured approach to identifying those different arguments. What clinical applications, which patient segments, how they're going to change the care pathways, understanding that. If your technology is a direct substitute, so you drop it into the existing care pathway, that's great. If actually it's going to radically change the care pathway, you need to understand that the clinicians who you are replacing are going to resist, because your cost saving is their revenue loss. In the US market especially, the hospitals, if you're moving something out of hospital into the community, that's their revenue. They have market power. They will use it to stop you. You need to think about those things to say, is there a way that I can design early on and choose my foothold into the market, my lead indication, that I don't pick those big fights first? And then what's the evidence journey conditioned on those choices? So that's the technology development investment case. Then there's the adoption case, which is looking at making clear what the return on investment to the payer is, with a price that gives you the commercial return that you need on your expected investment. And remember, the investment, it's money and it's time. Taking account of both of those, so understanding how long it takes to run a trial of the sort of size that a regulator is going to want. Diabetic foot ulcers, low hundreds. Cardiovascular disease, mid-thousands. very different story. Understanding that and what that means for your minimum commercially attractive price, and therefore, what you're going to have to hit in terms of effectiveness or your cost of goods. And then what's the potential budget impact? Because most of the time, budget impact isn't too important in tax and social insurance-based funding mechanisms, but sometimes really big budget impact changes the willingness to pay. Hepatitis C all oral therapies, hugely cost-effective at almost any level. Certainly at the price the companies came to market, hugely cost-effective. Budget impact was such that no health system, not even the US health systems, could afford to pay for all clinically indicated and cost-effective patient groups. Understanding that, because that means you're going to pick off the really high value first. So your revenue profile over time, post-market, it's not what you might have thought. Understanding that really helps. So that's the technology adoption case. And then the final is the technology trial case, that design of the on-market evidence generation. What are you going to collect? What evidence are you going to collect? How long will it take? And this is really important because payers are psychologically scarred from all the times where they adopt a technology to prove it's as good as they say, and when they find it isn't, they can't get rid of it. So they are very risk averse about entering into these on-market trial processes. Quantitative evaluation and design of these on-market trials means the contract that takes the technology into the system can be the contract that takes it out of the system if it isn't as good as everybody hoped. So you can de-risk to the payer that on-market trial proposition if you do it early and you arrive at market saying, hey, this is what we know. These are the important, not known well enough bits. This is how we would collect the data. This is how long we collect the data. And here's the decision set, depending upon what we find. We might find it's better. So HPV vaccination in boys, hugely better than we thought. In which case the price should go up, and you can have that in the contract. It might be just what we thought. We say, confirmed, wonderful, agreed price, goes forward. Or actually, it's not as good. And this is the ongoing price. But it's agreed. We don't remove risk, but we characterize and constrain risk. So that's the idea. This is basically one slide that summarizes what I have said about these three types of case. And I understand that the slides will be made available to participants afterwards. So rather than read through it again, if people are interested in this, we have a network of people like me providing these services through the Assess platform. And you can go there and you can find more information. And if you want to get in touch and set up a discussion about something specific, please do it through the Assess platform. Okay, there we go. Thank you.